Hey everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing The Neon Demon. This film came out in 2016 and it was directed by Nicholas Winding Refn. This was his follow-up to Only God Forgives, which was poorly received, both critically and commercially. And it did find a small audience. I hear about it every once in a while. But unfortunately, The Neon Demon also was not received very well initially when it came out. And I noticed it did really split audiences and critics alike. But man, as a critic, I get asked about this one a lot, as it certainly has gained an audience over time. And I see it continuing to trend in that direction. I think this movie is destined to be that camp film, that cult classic that is, very similar to movies like Showgirls. One of those very gaudy exploitation pieces that is meant to be enjoyed ironically. But man, I'm very conflicted about the movie. I will say right off the bat, I had a great time watching it. I got a real kick out of the entire experience, but at the same time, it's a hot mess. It really starts to unravel for me in the second half and going into the third act. But at the same time, it never lost me. But Refn has certainly been very brazen and very polarizing in his attitude. I think he's somebody that is quite full of himself. That's quite obvious. And this film really embodies a lot of that. It is dripping with narcissism. And it's both annoying in that sense, because it does, I feel, get a bit repetitive in that, but yet it's also so gleeful in its satire. It didn't take long for me to be compelled by it, but even as it started to lose me, I felt myself continuing to be compelled, thinking like, even if I'm not quite on board with this, I feel like I've got to keep going. I actually preferred this film, interestingly, to Drive by a long shot, and that is more just a personal taste thing. If I look at it from a certain perspective, absolutely Drive is more of a cohesive experience, and the script is just a lot more solid structurally. Just so much cleaner than Neon Demon, which again is a hot mess. But there is something about Drive where I felt like there was a real thinness to the aesthetic that felt lacking for me, especially in a world that's really depending on a lot of those postmodern sensibilities to bring out the nuance. I just felt like it didn't quite work. And I could see interesting ideas coming through. It just wasn't fully coming together for me. But when I watch Drive, I think there's always kind of a softness and a glossiness. There's an effeminate quality to it that I think contrasts a lot of the hard masculinity. But those two angles never quite harmonized for me in a satisfying way. It felt a little bit too on the nose. But with Neon Demon, just the mood and the tone of everything, the visuals, the experience of it, I found to be a lot more engaging, more hypnotic, despite the unevenness of it. And part of why it works, I think, is because of the subject matter. Part of it, I think, is just because this is about fetishization of an image. And so the softness, I think, can take more of the center stage, be more bold, more confident. And I like the fact that Refn is toying with more ambitious ideas, like he's toying with surrealism more here. There's a little Argento, there's a little Verhoeven, there's a little Kubrick, there's a little bit of Noé as well. So there's a lot going on here. One of the things that I think really worked about this movie, this might have been what won me over overall, is just the consistency in terms of the sense of humor of it. It's a lot more aware of itself, I think. It's a lot more aware of its humor, its cheekiness, I think, than a lot of people maybe realized initially when they saw it. And I can kind of say the same for Refn, just as a personality. You get a sense a lot of his narcissism and everything. It's all stuff that he's very aware of, and he's kind of doing a lot of it on purpose. And it can be quite funny in the right context. And he fully says, guilty as charged, whatever. I'm drawn to beauty just like the next person. I'm drawn to beauty more than almost anything else when you initially see somebody. But that's always very dangerous. The idea of beauty can be very dangerous. And I think the point of view here naturally is very cynical. Refn is very visual. He's not going to be cerebral or intimate. So he can make more of the points about this through the voyeurism of the cinematic experience. And this is kind of a classic loss of innocence tale where beauty is examined through violence, the submissive and the dominant, which also ties into sexuality, which ties into fetishization. All of these things are kind of cornerstones, keys to the fashion industry, to pop culture. With fashion design, it's all about surfaces. It is a superficial idea that is tapping into the most primal desires in an interesting way. And I think that's the real conflict for me of the film. And, we look at all these beautiful girls, we can't help that we're drawn to them. We can't help that we think they're beautiful. And yeah, just in terms of like visually what you're seeing, just the images of mirrors and all of that, none of it is particularly original. This is a story we've heard a million times, but I just I think I like the fact that he is really embracing the camp and the humor here. And I like that there's no real attempt at real depth to a degree. And the film even goes so far as to fully surrender itself to the artifice, to its thesis. And yeah, it's fully becoming the thing that it criticizes in a way where it just seems to be fully aware of it. And, you know, that can be interesting. But in the same breath, I also think a bit of that shamelessness as a director still is limiting for Refn creatively. I think he gets stilted and it begins to ruin the momentum of his films as they go on. And of course, you can say that's part of the point. Absolutely, that's always an argument to be made. But at the same time, I think there are ways of bringing out the external in a way that can be very interesting without being cerebral. Absolutely, it's been done, where the ideas can still open up. But, you know, as it stands, like I said, there's a lot that is hypnotic about this film. One of the things that really, really worked for me was the score. And, you know, it's in the style of like a late 70s and 80s, sort of like Tangerine Dream, Vangelis, even like, I'm gonna go even more hipster, like Throbbing Gristle, touch of that as well. Those kind of celestial sounds really draw you in just from the very opening moment of the opening credits. I love the synth patterns. I just love the digital kind of bleeping bloops, all the little textures there that just kind of fold on top of each other like waves. And it really helps to kind of put you in a sort of haze. And all of that is very pivotal, I think, when it comes to the very dreamy runway sequence, which is a very psychedelic scene. And you could see that as the part of the film that's meant to be an awakening of sorts, but it's really what's going on here is the opposite of that. Everything is all in black, and you see Elle Fanning and she's facing this occult symbol finally in the flesh. But in place of the ego death, this is more of like an ego enhancement. This symbol that looks like it might lead to some sort of transcendence, a symbol for the film, it simply becomes another aspect of fetishization. And I like when it becomes this like fractured mirror where she can really admire her own image. It reminded me of the final shot in All About Eve, with all of the reflections of the girl. And that scene, you know, I like it. I like that the shallowness is really coming through there and the humor is coming through and all of that. I almost wonder, though, if that sequence is just a little bit too literal for me. Just obvious in terms of the visual symbolism. I would have liked him to kind of go a little bit further, I think, reflect the same sense of shallowness with maybe a more complex image. The narcissism and just like the obsession with surfaces, it's all coming together in this moment. It just didn't feel for me quite as hypnotic as maybe the sequence with the photo shoot, you know, where she's, you know, has the gold paint all over her neck. That one felt a lot more complex and more present, more in the moment. A lot of these metaphors do feel a little bit tired for me, and it starts to feel that way more as the movie goes on. Things just begin to get more and more repetitive, and it causes the tension to deflate a little bit. I think the tension between the main girls is part of the issue in the second half. They feel too neatly placed in opposition to each other, where it's like, you know, player one goes here, player two goes here. And because of that, there's just not that much potential to open the story up, make it go into different directions, allow the plot or the ideas to thicken a little bit. I do think Refn, or part of my issue with him aesthetically in the past mainly, has been that he relies a little bit too heavily on that minimalism, and it doesn't, after a while, it doesn't lead to anything where you gain much. Things always feel just a little bit too neatly placed in order for it to come to life as a world. And I just would have liked to see Refn challenge himself a little bit, because I do think there are aspects of this industry that are quite complex, and there are aspects to women cattiness and competition there that I think you can bring to light in very cool ways. And you can even do a little bit of self-examination within that, because yes, he seems to be saying, I'm a lot like these people more than people want to admit, but why? And it's not like you necessarily have to answer that question. I just think I would have gained more, maybe, as a viewer. But instead, it sort of reduces the third act and the conflict there to a very literal joke about the competitiveness between women. And I don't know, it just felt like it fell flat. And yes, of course, at the same time, we can say that the reductive nature of everything is the point. It's supposed to kind of become more and more reductive until it becomes the thing that it's criticizing, for sure. I just think in ways, in terms of how he does this, I think he's limiting himself. I think it would have been more powerful if there was more irony there. But again, not in a cerebral way. I don't want to see, you know, a lot of depth in characters and all that. I really dig what he's going for. I just want him to push a little bit further. I want a little bit more honesty and a little bit more focus, but he's really inching his way there for me. And like I said, this movie was the one that won me over fully. I struggled with Drive. I struggled with Only God Forgives, and this is the one that finally I was like, okay, here we go. I just had fun with it, and there's something about the faded minimalism here that I think truly serves the subject matter. And in some ways, I think it did reveal more about Refn as a person creatively, just not quite there yet. Hopefully he will make another film, and it can, you know, go more in that direction I'd like to see. But yes, that is my review for The Neon Demon. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'm going to plug my website as always. It is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist and I do commissioned portraits. I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you're interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. Also, I'd like to give a shout out to my patrons who have been wonderful. Thank you guys so much for your support. If you were interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.